As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. As the founder of Bodybuzz, Conrad is a multi-certified personal trainer dedicated to helping clients save time, boost energy, and achieve sustainable results. With over 14 years of experience in personal training, rehabilitation, and injury prevention, he leverages EMS technology to offer effective workouts that empower clients. Fluent in Spanish, French, English, and German, Conrad holds degrees in languages applied to business and management and cross-cultural negotiations, as well as a master's in kinesiology. Specializing in working with individuals with diabetes, injuries, and chronic conditions, Conrad is passionate about continuous learning and client success. Outside of work, he enjoys attending seminars, playing basketball, exploring coffee shops, and traveling. So, Conrad, thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciate having you here. And you have this interesting niche in fitness and also a really diverse background. So I'm really excited to have you here today to talk a little bit about kind of where what your business is and that special version of what you do. So thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Anytime. So the first thing, so you're a personal trainer, have been for about 15 years. We hear this a lot with personal trainers. So you also have a master's degree in kinesiology. And I hear a lot of trainers who have this, and we kind of know it's maybe a good thing. You know, you've been through some extra college to do what you do. I've always wondered what that meant. Like, what does that mean?
Kinesiology?
Yeah.
It's a mouthful word, but it basically means the science of movement.
Okay.
That's what it translates to. But how it impacts your body is understanding how the body is connected together, and so how your foot pronating a little bit too much, how it affects your knee a little bit, how that affects your hip, how that affects your spine, and then you end up with a shoulder issue, but it has nothing to do from the shoulder. And I'm giving you a very vast example, but it's how seeing all the muscles are interconnected and how one joint affects the next joint. And so the typical problem is you see people like, oh, my knee hurts, and go to the doctor, and that's typically not the right pathway, because the doctor is going to be like, take Advil and let the swelling go down, but it's not addressing the issue, it's just addressing the symptom. And the issue might be like, okay, you need some corrective exercises for the foot or the hip, and that's affecting your knee.
And the reason I wanted to bring this up, and kind of I like this side of things, it wasn't until I went to a massage therapist because I was having some trouble with my knee. And he's like, well, let's work on your hip. I'm like, well, they're a little far apart from each other. Is that really it? And it did exactly what it was. I had a really angry muscle in my lower back somewhere, worked the hips a bit, and it stopped my knee problems. And I think once we think about that, all of these muscles are connected, and one thing goes wrong. Like I get a really angry muscle right around here. Just if I sneeze the wrong way, because I'm getting older and that's how it works. That might be something to do with something completely different that I'm not thinking of, so that was really fascinating part of it. And we always hear, I have, a bachelor's in kinesiology or master's in kinesiology. We never actually hear what it is, and that it's really learning how the body works. Right. Yeah. So now, to go along a bit with that though, you're not just a standard personal trainer. You've got a specific niche that you help with.
Yes.
What is that?
So it's called EMS for short. Otherwise, the full acronym is WBEMS, which stands for Whole Body Electrical Muscle Stimulation. It's been around for about 13, 14 years in Europe mostly. It started in Germany. But here in the US, I think the first devices started coming around 2007, but it took a very long time for other devices to enter the market until like 2018. That's when 3 or 4 devices, by devices entering the market, I mean that the FDA had to clear them. And so once the FDA cleared a few devices, then you started seeing some companies pop up, especially in like New York and around Miami and in LA as well. And but then COVID sort of like put a damper on many of these companies, and so they sort of went away, and now it's making a resurgence in the US. So in the US, it's still fairly recent. A lot of people have not heard of this. But what it is, it's you wear a vest with electrodes, and it's battery powered. And with an iPad, I can control the levels of each muscle group. And so it's a 20-minute workout that equates to about 2 hours of weightlifting.
Huh. That's really interesting. I think it's something we've seen before because I think these devices have been around as far as EMS devices. I think they've been around for a while. I remember
Yeah,
seeing back in the, back in the 80s that,
Bruce
sit with
Lee.
your coach and get abs,
Yeah, Bruce Lee. So yeah, Enter the Dragon with the Bruce Lee story. So he has like the electrodes, and he's like, oh, this is like doing 200 push-ups, but he's like typing a story, right? Like typing a book. Yes, so local EMS has been around for a long time, and mostly in the realm of rehab. And in physical therapy, they use something called the TENS unit.
Mhm.
And that is typically to relax the nervous system, relax the muscle, or in very like hardcore rehab settings, it could be to avoid atrophying the muscle. Like if you're bedridden, you put the stimulation so that the muscle is activated so that you don't completely lose it, deplete it.
Mhm.
But now it's made the jump into the fitness realm where the stimulation parameters are a little different to elicit a stronger muscle contraction, and therefore you get stronger. And so this is where EMS or WB EMS shines, is that it's getting your entire body stronger. And that's why the workout is shorter, is because even if you're doing a bicep curl, your glutes, your abs, your back, everything is still firing and it's still on.
Mhm. And I think anyone who's worked out at a gym understands, especially with form, or if you do it the wrong way, you understand that there are multiple muscles at play in this. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, how did you come across this? What was the series of events that made you go into specifically WBEMS?
Yeah, so my background, I'll start with how I got into personal training. I always wanted to help people, and this is the story you hear from all trainers. And but I got my degree in personal training from a school in New York, and I just felt like I know how to help someone who's healthy. Like that's it. Like I know what exercises to do with someone who is completely healthy, young, and able.
Mhm.
But what happens if someone comes in with a knee issue? What happens with some pregnant person? What happens with someone that's obese, someone that has diabetes? Like, what considerations do I need to be aware of? So very quickly in my career, I got as much education as I could. Like I just devoured every continuing education course that was in person, virtual, whatever it was. I just took it to the point where my manager at the gym was like, you're now the only person that can train this category of population. Everybody else can train the athletes and the models. You're the only person that can train this. So I'm just going to feed you clients. So it created a niche for myself with inadvertently, right? Like the marketing 101 is like, find your niche.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was doing that, but I found it, and it was much more rewarding than helping someone lose 10 pounds, right? Someone that wants to lose 10 pounds can hire any trainer, but someone that wants to lose 10 pounds and has diabetes and a shoulder issue, they need a more educated trainer, and that was where I wanted to be. So that was my career for the longest time, and I worked a lot with diabetes patients. I worked part-time for a hospital doing telehealth, prescribing exercise basically to diabetic patients. And there were some common issues or obstacles that came around over and over. And one of them is time, motivation, knowing what to do, pains, aches, injuries, right? Like these issues, and then access to like equipment. I was in New York at the time. Nobody has space in their apartments. There's no backyards, right? Like, and it's cold for part of the year, right? So there are a lot of issues that don't allow you to just go outside for a jog or work out at a park. Or so I finally came across EMS, to answer your question. When I got introduced to a French investor that owned a franchise in Brazil, EMS franchise in Brazil. They have about 50 locations. And he wanted to replicate that franchise, recreated it in the US, starting in New York. So they hired me as the head trainer. And so I started getting educated into EMS through two manufacturers actually at the time. And we were about to open when COVID hit and everything got to a halt. But it piqued my interest enough that I went through all the research that was available. I still read research whenever it comes out online. I got more education through other manufacturers, and yeah, and now I'm in it for the long haul.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting you mentioned, Europe did it too, because you are from Europe, specifically France and Spain. So you would have heard about that first and kind of brought that over. Is that really what happened? Where you kind of brought it,
Not
or is it
quite.
sort of revival
When I would go back to Europe, so I have family in
There you
Europe,
go.
and I would see it, and I would be surprised. I was like, I was very skeptical because
Mm.
there's always products that come out, and 2 years later they disappear. And specifically in the case of Spain, Spain just exploded with EMS centers and then imploded very quickly. And it's because they had no idea what they were doing. They were basically hooking up people onto the suit and then leaving, like, okay, we'll be back in 20 minutes, and then leaving the person on their own and like no idea what they were doing. And so the market imploded very quickly. And then the fact that I didn't see it in the US, I thought, like, I don't know, something must be off about it. The other reason is that I was very skeptical. I had heard about the localized EMS, right? Like the Bruce Lee and all these apparatus that I was like, it can't be real, right? Like it can't be real. But then I went to a studio in New York at the time. It was called Shock Therapy, and I did a session. And I think the trainer wanted to impress me a little bit and gave me some extra juice because after the workout, I felt this was like a warm-up, like a long warm-up. This was like a 20-minute warm-up. Now I feel like I could go for a run or so, but he did tell me, don't do anything else for another day or two. The next day, I didn't feel much, but the following day, my glutes were as sore as they had ever been for 5 straight days. I could not sit down. It was painful. Like it was really effective. And I train glutes. Like it's not like I do deadlifts, squats. Like I do all the exercises for the glutes. I played basketball all my life. Like I'm very well aware of like using my glutes for jumping and everything. This was an eye opener.
Huh. Interesting, because I think a lot of times we think about EMS kind of being cheating. It's those things that you see sauna pants in the 70s where it seems like an interesting idea, but it's something I would see, on as seen on TV.
Yeah. So the cheating aspect, I want to say technology advances, and right, nobody sees sending an email as cheating versus writing a letter. I mean, driving a car versus riding a horse, right? Like technology is here, just use it. The other thing I would say is that it is cheating if you are able to do other things, right? Like that's the like, oh, if you can lift weights, then lift weights. But not everybody is available. Not everybody has the time to spend an hour and a half in the gym 3-5 days a week. Not everybody has the mobility to do so. With EMS, you don't need to have full range of motion. Like it's great if you have it, but if you don't have it, the electrode is directly on the muscle. So you're still going to get a benefit if you can contract that muscle. If you have pains, injuries, this is low impact. You don't have to jump. You don't have to put heavy weights on you. In fact, we barely use any weights. That's another benefit of this, is that we don't need a lot of equipment. At most, we use like 15 pounds. And that's for very heavy movements. Otherwise, 3 pounds, 5 pounds, mostly to guide the movement.
And I think that's something that, especially as we start aging, we think about, especially for women, where bone density can be an issue. And, like thinking about my mom going to a gym kind of makes me twitch a little bit because with the huge amounts of weight we're working with, the weight you're working with, and the amount that, one wrong move and you've now hurt yourself. And I think this could be an interesting alternative to people, like you said, that don't have that range of motion or have something else going on where they wouldn't be able to. They would need something more low impact, but still want the results of a standard traditional workout.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that concept is that EMS is short, and that's one of the major benefits that everybody taunts, but it is low impact and it's intense. And low impact and intense, some people confuse like, oh, it's low impact, does it mean low intensity? And no, it doesn't have to be. Except there aren't that many things in the fitness industry that allow low impact and high intensity. So for example, we usually do the like low impact and high intensity can be like doing sprints on the elliptical. The elliptical is low impact, but then going at a very high intensity. But that still remains cardiovascular. It doesn't go into the realm of resistance training, which is what you need for bone density and osteoporosis and so on. So in terms of high intensity in the resistance training realm, you need a lot of weight. You need to use enough weight that challenges the muscle and challenges the bone density. Typically about 30% of your body weight, but you mentioned the example of your mother, right? Like walking to a gym and just going to the squat rack and being like, hey, I got next, and like, can I, right? Like, it's a little unfathomable to think that someone in that situation is really gonna go into the heavyweight area. There's a lot of intimidation. There's like, I don't know what to do. I don't feel comfortable. The gyms don't make it. Most gyms don't
it's a different environment than we're used to,
right? Like, they don't create a culture that is like, yeah, everybody's invited. Like, even like Planet Fitness, where with the no judgment zone, like you go in and it's a bunch of 16-year-olds, right? And lifting. So you're not going to want your mom to go into that environment. So here, EMS has to be done with a trainer. We provide a service that's one-on-one and one-on-two. So it allows for a lot of personalization. It allows for a lot of customization in terms of the programming, in terms of the weights, in terms of the movements. And it's going to be as intense as the person wants to.
Now, you were saying earlier that you train with weights. Is that with the EMS? And like, what is do you just get additional balance, additional benefits from it? What's the process?
So it mostly helps guide the movement. If you ask someone to do a bicep curl, they're gonna do a little better if they have something in their hands. Basically, it just helps with guiding the movement, because people are used to certain exercises, and if they have something in their hands, they're gonna feel like, okay, now I know what to do. But the weight is not necessarily to load the muscle. Like when you're doing a squat without EMS, you want to load as much as your legs can handle, as long as your core and your legs can handle, then you want to load as much as possible, right? To get stronger, whether it's 1 rep or 20 reps, you want to be able to get to that last repetition and not be able to do more. So that dictates how much weight to put on the bar. With EMS, typically we ignore that and we just go by how much EMS stimulation they can take, right? So the intensity on the stimulation is what dictates the overall intensity. And so it's perceived rate of exertion, where the person has to tell you like, okay, this is enough. This is, if it's too much, then it becomes a little painful, or they can't move, like it locks their joint, and then we don't bring it down.
So I'm sitting there essentially doing the arm curl, but also with a very light weight, and I also have this thing that's kind of helping me do that as well. So it's actually stimulating as I do it.
Yeah. So you contract your muscle, and the stimulation enhances that contraction. It makes it harder. When we at events and so on, we sometimes have a mannequin with a suit, and we allow people to try the arm bands, so just the arms, and we have them do bicep curls to try it. And the weight we use is stress balls. And we've had bodybuilders come in and like they're like holding the stress ball and they're trying to curl, and they're like, wow, this is so intense, and it makes the movement a little more challenging, which is what you want.
Yeah, interesting. And I know you mentioned in your bio when you were chatting with me about being on the show that you also help women over 50, which I think is an interesting sub niche, because that's why I wanted to kind of bring my mom. She's in her mid 70s, and the problem she runs into is osteoporosis. I have an aunt with a very, very significant osteoporosis. Like she would not be able to work out. And I think it's, talk a little bit about how you got into that and what some of the benefits are. Yeah.
For osteoporosis,
specifically for, like, you say that you specialize with trying primarily with women over 50, and that, like, what are some of the results that you see from that? Because that's not a how do I put this? That's not a target audience I would think of as a personal trainer, but you have an interesting kind of take on it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, but in general, the EMS attracts people that don't necessarily want to go to the gym or want to lift weights or like the gym environment. So that's and so we see in the boutique fitness industry, like separate from the big box gyms, we see in the boutique fitness industry, we see a lot of women, like mostly like Orange Theory, F45, you go, and some may be about 50% male to female ratio, but for the most part, women are the primary audience for boutique fitness. Without mentioning like Pilates and yoga studios and so on, right? Like that's very much primarily women. Here it's resistance training, and there's been a shift in society a little bit where mostly women have been a little more like, there was always a fear of getting bulkier. Like, I don't want to get big muscles. And so there was a bit of an avoidance for many years of weightlifting. Now there's been a shift in the last, like, I would say 10 years. There's always been women lifting, but in the last 10 years, there are more women more aware that they need to lift and they need to do weights and they need to do resistance training. And especially as, I mean, men are also at risk of osteoporosis and so on. This is not a female specific issue, but their doctors typically will start telling them, like, when they reach around age 40, 45, and they go get a checkup, their doctors will start saying like, hey, your bone density is low, you need this, that, right? Like, you need to start doing weight-bearing exercises. So they start hearing it from their doctor typically, and maybe that's why they start looking for resistance training. And so we get found because we're not exactly that gym traditional environment. We're different. And also, like, our studio in Newport Beach is like very like beige colors, and like it's very, and like you come in and you feel like, oh, I'm like in a little cocoon, or it's a pleasant environment.
I'm more going for a massage than I am going to the gym. Yeah, understood. It completely makes sense. There's some of us like myself. I love the gym atmosphere, but there is an atmosphere about it, and I can see why people would be a little bit intimidated to come into that at first. So that makes sense. So as we're kind of getting towards the end of things, I do want to ask one question, and that one question is, what is one book or podcast that has had a significant impact on your life?
So I can only answer one, right?
Nice. Oh no, you're welcome. If you want to double dip, you're welcome to. You're not the only one.
Double dip, okay. I'm gonna mention three two podcasts and a book.
Cool.
The book is Finding Your Why by Simon Sinek, right? Like, it's about like really getting deep into why you are in the industry you are, and the job you are in, and really connecting on a very deep emotional level with what you're doing. That's one book. Two podcasts. One is called the Fitcast. I don't think they're around anymore, but the Fitcast has about 400 episodes or so. And when I became a trainer, the Fitcast was just starting. And so this was already 15 years ago. And every episode had very like top tier fitness trainers and coaches and strength and conditioning coaches that would just give all their advice and tips and all this stuff. And so I learned a ton from the Fitcast. It was basically my second university. And then the other podcast I want to mention is Yoga is Dead. Yoga is Dead is just a 6-episode podcast by Tejal Patel and Jaisal Barik. And it's about all the issues around the yoga industry specifically, but it touches on racism, it touches on cults, it touches on like how the industry works, which is very similar to the fitness industry. I mean, yoga is lumped in with the fitness industry, but how instructors are paid and how the culture goes around the work environment is very interesting and very well thought out and researched. So those are my three.
What was the name of the yoga podcast again?
Yoga is Dead.
Yoga is Dead. Okay.
Yoga is Dead. Yeah, and every episode is called like, so blah 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 killed yoga, and
interesting
gurus killed yoga, and yeah, so it's very.
That sounds really interesting. Perfect. Well, Conrad, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate the wisdom you spread.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Conrad, check out the link in the description.